when I think of the word fluent, an example I use a lot of times is that I'm very fluent in sarcasm. I don't have to really think about being sarcastic. It just kind of comes out. Like it's easy. It's an ease to me communicating in a sarcastic way. It doesn't mean it's good, but it just comes out because it's in me. I think so when you consider gospel fluency, it's seeing the gospel in all of life, seeing it in my discipleship, in my parenting, in my hospitality, in my modesty, in my motherhood, just whatever I'm doing, wherever I am, seeing how the gospel should inform that. I think when I look at the American church and I consider, I guess, the struggle when it comes to gospel fluency is, I think people think that the gospel is only a means of evangelism and not discipleship, because I'll have conversations with people and they speak of the gospel as if it was only something that happened once. They received it, they heard what Jesus had did on the cross, they heard the resurrection from the dead, they believed and repented in his name. But then when I say, okay, how does the gospel inform your temptations? They have no explanation for it. Where I feel like the church has, not holistically, but in some ways not equipped people to understand that the gospel should inform everything. It doesn't just stop at salvation, it continues. The gospel changes the way I look at everything. So when I'm a new believer, yes, I just received the gospel last week and repented and believed, and today I need it just as much as I did last week. When I'm faced with a temptation, I'm faced with a struggle, I'm faced with a job decision that I need to make, seeing the sufficiency of Christ in the cross and how that relates to me is huge. So I think the church just needs to get back to what the Bible did. The gospel was everywhere. It was in Genesis and Revelation. So who are we to think that it shouldn't be consistent throughout everything in our churches? I think my only assumption would be they've lost sight of the gospel because they've lost sight of God. I think if you don't have a right view of God, then that distorts how you view the gospel. Because me having a neediness and a thirst for God in all of life means that I have to go back to the clearest example of God's person and love and grace and wrath and justice and fairness and acceptance, which is in the gospel. And so I think if the church can kind of be weaned off of other idols, off of lesser versions of God, and back to just God himself and him being everything that we need, then that would move us into seeing that God and the gospel are inseparable. I think one thing is people, I think when they read the Bible, they assume it's about them. I think they read Romans or they read Psalms and it's me, not saying that the Bible's about God. And so I think if we begin to study the Bible and study it looking for God, and then we preach it exalting God, and then we speak it to remind us of God, that will change, I think, the dynamics of how we approach even gospel fluency, because now it becomes a God thing and not a me thing. Now, it affects me and impacts me, but ultimately it has to be God first and foremost. He is the Alpha and Omega. I'm not. I need him, And so I think if we just get back to the Word of God being the Word of God and seeing it for what it is, which is a book that it shows the glory of God and how the glory of God then changes how I see me, see sin, see life, then I think we're starting on the right track. I can speak for me when I began to recognize how the gospel impacts life, our daily life, is when I was being discipled and I was really dealing with temptation a whole lot. And I didn't really know how to fight. When you're a new believer, you have been given in so long, you don't know what to do. It's like, I don't know how to fight this. And my discipler was the one who told me, Jackie, the gospel doesn't just save you, it keeps you. She was like, trust God. Like, that sin you're dealing with, that temptation you're dealing with, that literally was placed on him on the cross, and God poured out his wrath on that, and Jesus went to the grave and defeated it. So you could literally look at Jesus and say and see that you don't have to give in to this. If Jesus is risen from the dead, then surely you could walk away from this sin. And that was revolutionary to me. I had no idea that the gospel could affect me not only on Sunday, but on a Tuesday.